Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey, Cory, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Hello, how are you, Sam?
I'm doing well. Thanks for sparing this afternoon with me.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to it. When they told me that you guys wanted to reach out and for an interview, I was very excited about it. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Cory, obviously, the people that may not have heard of you, can you share a quick bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Cory Williams. I'm from a small town in Virginia, called Chatham, Virginia. I'm CEO of Epic Partners, Epic Management Group, which is a real estate company, and a partner of C&E Holdings.
And obviously, everyone has a story of an amazing story of how they overcome obstacles of becoming an entrepreneur. And yours is, pretty much the same story. You had an amazing story of how you overcame obstacle. You were actually in the corporate world first, and your training and everything led you to become an entrepreneur. Can you share that journey of how you became an entrepreneur?
Absolutely. So I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur at a young age, Sam. And I can remember back before Twitter and Instagram, there was Facebook and MySpace, and my screen name on MySpace was CEO Cory Williams. Mm-hmm. Even in college business classes came naturally to me. I enjoyed going. And my father was one of the biggest inspirations in me being an entrepreneur due to him being one. And teaching me to go for what I love to do. Mm-hmm. Not to be afraid to take risks.
Before you started your entrepreneurial journey, you actually were in the corporate world. You want to share a little bit about that journey of going from a corporate world into starting an entrepreneurial career?
Yes, being in a corporate environment was very instrumental in my success of being an entrepreneur. It taught me corporate structure, how to establish processes and procedures. Started my career with Goodyear Tire, which is a Fortune 500 company, and I worked for them for almost 8 years in several management capacities. Gave me a valuable piece of experience over time, and I applied that into entrepreneurship.
And then obviously from there you decided to I think you first started in real estate before you went on to start your healthcare business with almost 30, how many locations do you have now under the Epic Health Partners?
We have 4 locations now and over 120 plus employees in the state of Mississippi, and we have 3 in the state of Virginia.
And you're also in the private equity space as well, right? You were in mergers and acquisition as well.
Absolutely. It's important for leaders and entrepreneurs to diversify. Mm-hmm. I try to follow the advice given of having 7 different streams of income. Mm-hmm. I call it the recession-proof model. And that's something that we're striving to do on a daily basis.
Understood. So what is your compelling reason why? What drives Cory Williams?
My why is my ambition and desire to continue to strive to be the best that Cory Williams could possibly be. Mm-hmm. To leave a legacy that my children's children can be proud of. To always leave people in a better position than I am. That's my why.
I mean, obviously, you've had, in such a young age, you've had so many accomplishments. You went from corporate world, went down to being an entrepreneur, started multiple different businesses. You're in venture capital, you're in healthcare sector, you're also in real estate. You're also, trying to put an event for entrepreneurs in terms of training. There's a lot of things you accomplished in such a short time. Of all the things you accomplished, what is one thing you're super proud of?
Sam, the biggest accomplishment that I'm the most proud of is earning the respect of my peers, mentors, family, and friends. For the people that I lean on heavily as my support system to respect me and what I do and value my opinion, it means everything to me.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that you continue to do to make sure that stays intact?
It's a continued pursuit of moving on to the next level and being even more successful.
Understood. And how do you define success in your opinion?
Success, in my opinion, is doing whatever makes you happy. I'm a very driven individual. I hate to lose. I love sports. I'm kind of a sore loser with respect to everyone. And being the best person that I can be and leaving a legacy that can be followed and admired is very important to me.
Most certainly. And obviously, you've built multiple different businesses, and you said about having 7 different streams of income. I'm sure in the process you've learned a lot of lessons, some good lessons and some bad lessons. So can you share some life lessons you've learned of building a business?
One of the biggest lessons I've learned with building a business is treating people the way you would want to be treated, and hiring the best talent and getting out of their way. Strong believer in that.
And what are you doing to attract such talent, those A players that everybody dreams about, right? The ones that you can easily elevate and delegate, and that's the dream of an entrepreneur. What are some of the things you do to make sure you find such candidates?
Well, there's a continued pursuit of finding A players, because everybody's not an A player, and they all have a role. It depends on what they consider to be their strengths and weaknesses. So finding the best talent who are passionate, I usually go by doing interviews if they're passionate about what they're doing, and if they love what they're doing, it's not like work to them. So I take a big emphasis on who the person is as an individual.
Yeah, and I think I just was reading this book by Patrick Lencioni. He talks about humble, hungry, and smart, which smart he means emotional intelligence. And then he said you got to have all 3 of those things in equal measures. If you are just hungry and you're smart, but then you're not humble, that's a combo you don't want. It's like a hard-headed person who never listens to anybody's opinion and they think they know it all, right? So finding that A player is like a needle in a haystack. And sometimes who may not be an A player in your organization might be an A player somewhere else. It's just that they have to find their home. And it may not be at your house, right? Like in your organization. But that's a constant pursuit, like you said.
Absolutely, Sam. And I agree. Finding A players are they're tough. I mean, they don't make necessarily A players in regards to what you're trying to do. Like you mentioned, they can be A players in whatever their passion is. I think everyone have a genius level talent. It's up to us to tap into that, and once you figure that out, you have to pursue that. I challenge everyone to pursue what their genius level talent or passion that God blessed them to have.
That's so true. Yeah. And I think as a leader, our responsibility is how do we raise them up, right? How do we pull that out of them and encourage them to live up to their full potential, right? And that is the primary objective of a leader. Which kind of brings me to a question, because there's a dichotomy that I often think that, especially as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to switch between this leader role and a manager role. Do you feel like you kind of have to do that in your organization with the multiple organizations that you're running?
Absolutely. I think that you have managers and you have leaders, and developing managers into leaders is tough to do, but it's also necessary. I feel that a manager manages processes and procedures. I feel that a leader leads people to places that they cannot see themselves. I generally like to lead and inspire leadership amongst my team.
And what are some of the things that you're doing to build that leadership skills in you?
I attend several leadership groups. I'm an avid member of CEO leadership group called Vistage CEO Leadership. Niels Lemessurier is my coach, and it's a group of around 20 plus CEOs. They're a lot older than me, and leaning on them for advice and ideas and is critical to my development and growth.
And who has been the biggest influence on your leadership style?
All of my past leaders and mentors have contributed equally to my leadership style. I've honestly been able to take a little bit from each of them and apply it to what I do and how I operate on a daily basis. Um, if I had one piece of information that they would give me that I would want to leave with others, is to never be afraid to make a decision. You
Mhm.
either make the right decision or you learn from it. You never lose. It's never a bad decision.
Yeah, and I think the biggest character of an entrepreneur is like it's not a failure, right? It's just an opportunity to learn and improve and innovate, as opposed to seeing any failure as the final outcome.
Absolutely. Sometimes when I would look back at my past and be like, I should have done that differently, but maybe my mindset wasn't equipped to handle what I'm going through now, and maybe I wouldn't have done the same exact things the way that I've done it once I gained experience and more leadership abilities.
And has there ever been a time in your career where you were kind of resistant to change?
Absolutely. I used to think the statement, if it's not broke, don't fix it, was a good practice to follow.
Hmm.
I disagree with that statement today. The world is constantly changing and moving at such a rapid pace that if you're not changing or evolving, then you're getting smaller.
Hmm. And sometimes technology is like the biggest change. Have you seen technology being worked against you in your businesses that you're running, or has it always been an enabler in terms of getting you to the next level?
I, I think that COVID-19 pushed my organization to pursue enhanced technology to the next level. So I would never consider technology to be um, a deterrent factor for where we are or a prohibiting factor for where we need to go. Because if you're not implementing technology, that's the way of the world today.
Hmm.
It's critical to all businesses now. You can look at major real estate companies don't own any real estate. They're using technology to generate revenue. So technology is very important.
Hmm. I'm sure you're probably referring to Airbnb, right? They're a technology company at the end of the day, or in Uber. They don't own any asset except the technology, which is their intellectual property. And I think, especially you being in the virtual healthcare, I mean, you're in the healthcare sector now offering virtual behavioral health services. I'm sure you're seeing a complete shift in terms of how you are serving the customer base now, with especially after COVID, right?
Absolutely, and it's important that we utilize the key learnings from COVID to propel us into the next level of healthcare because I think that's where it's headed. It's headed towards an Uber of healthcare and an Airbnb of healthcare. So eventually is used to be a face-to-face interaction, but it's moving more towards the technology. It's going to be a technology. We're going to probably be a technology company that provides healthcare services
Mhm.
down the road, and it's
And it's
important to be open-minded to that.
and it's so crazy too, because in the past, the playing ground is actually getting like somewhat it's even for everyone, right? So in the past it was like, hey, if I was in Chicago, I'm only able to service the customers in that market, the healthcare wise, and you were kind of limited based on geographic reach that you had. And today it's not the case anymore. I can, assuming that the government provides less regulations to control such things, you can essentially see patients in California or in New York or in Texas. You're not, defined by the geographic region anymore, right? And which is a completely different shift from where the industry was 2 months ago.
Definitely, it's going to change the way we do business.
Hmm.
And being ahead of that curve instead of behind the curve is critical to the long-term sustainability of any organization in the healthcare field.
Hmm. And how has your outlook on sales and marketing changed as you saw the technology evolving, and how you saw how you need to go to market and reach your customers?
And coming having an operations background at Goodyear and Troxler, um, I used to resent sales and marketing, but as I've gained valuable experience as a CEO, um, I've, I've been able to appreciate sales and marketing a lot more.
Hmm.
Um, it's the lifeline of any organization, and how we deliver sales and marketing has changed too. I mean, we're
Hmm.
using used to have newspapers and things like that that you would put place ads in, or maybe TV commercials. But digital marketing via technology is taking over the sales and marketing aspect also.
And how has that helped you in terms of your scaling? Because obviously in the past, when you talk about print or traditional, like going to an event or, locally, bringing customers to have some one-on-one experience, right, with your service offerings, how has that helped you in terms of your reach?
Oh, tremendously. Think about it from a demographic standpoint. If you look at what the population is for a location that you're in versus you can have the same material that can reach the entire United States at some capacity. And so it depends on what level you would like to propel that information to, but it increases your reach tremendously, and it also improves improves the logistics of reaching people. You can reach them a lot faster as well with a lot less manpower.
Most certainly. And I think the question that I have is, especially as you're, I know you're in the acquisition business, you love expanding your business through acquisition. And when you're selecting a market or picking a company that you want to invest into, what are some of the things that you're doing on the assessment of the company value? Not just looking at the customer base that they have or the book of business, but also their digital value, right? Like their digital presence. Do you actually value that in terms of an asset that the business owns?
Definitely, that has a significant weight on the multiple of what you offer for the company, based off of whether they're technology advanced or not.
Mhm.
Uh, and it adds, if they're not, it also adds synergies where you can see where you can add additional revenue to the organization without paying for it up front also. So that's something we definitely look into during the due diligence period. Very thorough.
Yeah, because I've seen, especially when old school entrepreneurs that are in the private equity or in venture space that actually are acquiring businesses, oftentimes they just overvalue the company's assets that are just the customers or the equipments or the IP alone, but they undervalue their digital presence, right? The brand equity that they built, the reviews that they have, the website that gets tons of traffic. And then that website that drives inbound leads, all sorts of stuff like that. But oftentimes they overlook that. The reason I bring up that question is, in my experience, I've seen where there's been a mergers of an acquisition, and then they just go and shut the whole business down. Like their website, they let the domain name expire, they turn off the website, they even let the phone number go away. And people try to call that old number and you can't reach them, the website doesn't exist. And we're like, why would you do that? And so I'm just curious, your thought process in terms of when you're looking at acquiring a company, how have you approached that part of it than just looking at the numbers?
I look at it as if the company does not have the digital presence, then I look at it as a positive that we don't have to put a multiple on,
Mm-hmm.
with purchasing the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I also look at it as if we have a competitor that devalues the importance of digital marketing and things of that nature, then I feel like that we're going to have the edge on. I know for a fact that we're going to have the edge over them because we see the true value
Mm-hmm.
in digital marketing. It's the way of life now, and
Mm-hmm.
if we're not adapting to it, then we're going to get left behind.
Most certainly, yeah. And I think it's adapt or obsolete. That's the motto. And I think, oftentimes some of the stories that I think about is, I look at Sears or I look at some of those other big giants or even look at Walmart. They had the chance of becoming the Amazon, but they let Amazon take up the market space. Then they're like, oh, we need to go buy a bunch of things. And they went down to buy a bunch of other techs, e-commerce platforms, only to catch up to Amazon. By then, Amazon was way ahead of them, right? So I think the adapting concept or becoming obsolete, we're seeing right in front of our eyes. And I still see entrepreneurs aren't really, fast in terms of recognizing that shift that's happening in the marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. That's been the death of several very successful companies 5 years, even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's important as I do case studies on these large companies. And it's important for me that I structure our organizations where you have younger talent involved and you have career paths for them, because that's critical, because they have a bigger insight in what's to come than we do as we get older. And I think that it was oversight on those large companies' parts. I agree with you, Walmart, I agree, J.C. Penney, Sears. It's oversight, and even during those case studies, it was brought to their attention, and they ignored it. So, and it was part of their demise.
Yeah, most certainly. Are there anything that you saw as from your study of those companies as far as learning from them? What are some of the takeaways that you have, apart from just the technology adoption and going to market with a digital strategy? What were some of the other things that you saw where you thought that was a simple oversight on their part?
Um, as I mentioned before, with hiring younger talent, making sure you understand your customer. I don't think they truly understood their customer, and I felt like they thought they may have been the customer, and the customer is obligated to purchase from them. But it's key to understand them and how you can best support them, because they'll tell you where you need to take your organization.
And I think that seamless experience is a big thing in today's world. For example, like I'm talking about medical space. Like I already check in to my clinic before I even leave my home, right? And I don't want to touch their pad and sign on. And I want to be able to swap my phone and pay for my whatever you call, like the doc fees. And then I want as much as touchless, I want to get out of there, right? But I still go to dental clinics and they pass me a board with 25 pages. And I look at it, I'm like, you should have this. I was here last year. Nothing about me changed? Why are you making me go through all this paper friction, right? I don't want to deal with it. And I think that's the thing that I'm actually seeing, that some of these old school companies are just still thinking customers are just going to keep up with the way that you've been doing for the last 20 years. But I'm not interested in doing business the way you've been doing for 20 years. I want to have that Amazon experience. I want to check in before I come in. And I want you to know that I'm actually coming in and greet me when I walk in the door, because you have a machine that tells you that person that walked in is Samuel.
Absolutely. And if you look at it, think about it. We get groceries delivered to our home now. It's a way of life, and providing services outside of brick and mortar is going to be critical to anyone's success. I'm even worried about it as in real estate, because real estate values might decrease or decline based off of everything so accessible. And that's what the customer wants. That's where we're headed. So it's important for organizations and leaders to understand that and not be resistant to it.
And obviously, over the years, if you said you're part of Vistage and you're surrounded by a lot of CEOs that give you advice. Have you heard any bad advice? You listen to it, you're like, I don't think that's such a good advice.
So, Sam, I wouldn't classify any recommendations as bad advice. I feel that leaders should evaluate whether that advice fits them or what they're trying to do. I think that you can find the good in all of any bad advice or bad situations, and see if it applies to you. And if it doesn't, don't apply it. If it does, see what you can use from it and move forward.
Most certainly. And obviously, what advice do you have for somebody who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur?
The advice I would have for an aspiring entrepreneur is to figure out what your desires and true passions are. I strongly feel that God has blessed us, everyone, as I mentioned before, with a genius level talent. It's up to us to tap into that and figure out what that is. If you're doing what you love to do, you won't work. I don't feel like you work a day in your life, and that's what I'm doing. I'm business, evaluating numbers, evaluating other organizations as well. That's something that I love to do.
And let the passion take over as opposed to just trying to pursue money. Because I think oftentimes what happens is people have like the money as the driver, and then they are just pursuing money, and then in the process they lose it all. Like you lose friendship, you lose your family. You might achieve greatness in terms of building a business or money, but then also that's just not where you want to be at the end of it, right?
Definitely, because you hate going to work, or you're not doing a very good job, and your customers and your team members, they can tell. Yeah,
because I think the passion. Yeah, and the passion goes before you. And you can tell in terms of somebody who's doing it out of passion and desire as opposed to just doing it out of duty. and there's no delight in what they're actually bringing to market. So,
Absolutely.
And I know with especially entrepreneurs, right? Occasionally our life is, we're solopreneurs, meaning like we're on our own in most cases, even though we have team and structure and everything around us. A lot of stuff we're trying to solve business challenges. We're awake at night thinking about tomorrow, and we're constantly thinking about this challenge or that problem or this market. All those things are always going through our mind, but a lot of it is a mindset game, right? So talk to me a little bit about how you have that entrepreneurial mindset to keep going.
I've trained myself to balance the highs and lows, right? As I mentioned, is never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is. It's important to trust the process, and continue to make step by step, stride by stride, until you accomplish your mission or your goal.
Mm-hmm. So that is basically the way that you approach the mindset aspect of it. And I know you touched on the whole aspect of you're part of the Vistage group, and I oftentimes I hear people talk about they're part of a mastermind and all sorts of other stuff like that. When did you decide it was time for you to actually be surrounded by other business leaders who are much older than you and have a lot more experience?
Actually, the credit goes to one of my mentors, old boss, Eric Dunkelberg. He introduced me to the Vistage. It was a key member group at that point because I was the director of ops at Trisha Electronics. Mm-hmm. And once I became CEO, I transitioned along with him to the CEO group. He was in the CEO leadership group prior to me. Mm-hmm. And it's been instrumental in everything that I do in regards to personal life, professional. We discuss, and you're in a room full of CEOs, and you discuss several different topics, but you can have the same conversations with like-minded people and bounce ideas off each other. That's critical.
Mm-hmm. And when somebody referred that Vistage group, you thought that was a great idea. And I see a lot of lone wolf entrepreneurs, and oftentimes they're successful. And I think there is definitely a great amount of value in surrounding yourself with other people who are actually like-minded and also have a lot more years of experience, because it's almost like reading a book, right? Because when you pick up a book and you have 200 pages, somebody who had 20 years of experience wrote that 200 pages, and you just take one page out of it, you probably cut short your success by so many years sometimes, because you're getting that one nugget of wisdom. And I think I see the same thing. I belong to something called Convene, which is a lot of Christian entrepreneurs that is part of that group. And I find it to be extremely useful. That's why I was curious, when did you decide that Vistage was something you wanted to do?
At the age, I was 26 years old when I initially joined Vistage. I'm 35 now, and I plan to stay a part of Vistage as long as I possibly can.
Yeah, most certainly. There's a great wisdom there. Obviously, one of the big thing about building a business that is way beyond you is all about the systems and process, right? Because a lot of times, people who are building a business, they are the business, meaning like everything kind of is in their head. So talk to me a little bit about how are you able to operate multiple business? What kind of systems and process have you put in place to be able to scale your time and also to scale the companies that you're growing?
Having a background in operations has been instrumental in my development of systems and processes. It's critical for leaders to implement KPIs, especially leaders that have multiple businesses, to implement KPIs to help them identify problems sooner. We've been able to do that throughout several of my organizations, and it allows me to look at metrics and identify to ask further questions or clarifying questions that can identify if we have an issue or not. And that's critical when you have several different moving parts.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of KPIs, are they kind of broken up into the sales metrics, marketing metrics, service, or whatever those things are? Do you have different key metrics like that? Is that?
Absolutely. And they're also broken down into department metrics for each department, for each organization. And we have a weekly meeting with each organization, and we all go through what they look like, and what's our corrective action plan if needed, or if everything's going smoothly, what are we going to do next? How are we planning for the future, etc.
And do you use any kind of business system like Traction or anything like that for your organization?
We do not. I've read the book Traction. It's a great read. I advise anybody, any leader, to read that book.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't applied it to our organization, but we have taken some things from Traction and applied it to the organization.
Understood. And obviously, go ahead.
It's an excellent read.
It certainly is. Certainly, yeah. Someone, especially if they're getting started or they already have a business and just pulling their hair, if they need a way to get out of that, right, that rut of where they are in, and it really teaches you what you need to do to build systems and process. And then as far as obviously you have multiple different businesses. You have one, like your private equity firm, which is doing mergers and acquisition. You have your healthcare sector, you have real estate, and you're also trying to do so many other things. How do you kind of compartmentalize all these different type of businesses? Because sometimes it's hard to shift your mind from, okay, I'm servicing healthcare sector, and now I have to go figure out about buying buildings. How do you do that? To me, that seems big skill to have.
I juggle it because it's my passion, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see in my eyes, I light up when it's really not work to me.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy solving business problems or looking at things that are and seeing the end result, whether it's a successful result or an unsuccessful one.
Mm-hmm.
So it all just comes. I wake up in the morning, I go to bed at night, and kiss the wife, the kids, and I just go to work, and it's not work to me. And then it also allows me, being an entrepreneur, also allows me the flexibility to make sure that I'm able to spend the necessary time with them, because that's important in this way.
Most certainly. So, which brings me to my question about productivity hacks, because a lot of times I think it really comes down to being able to, prioritize and focus on the important as opposed to the urgent, because we're all guilty of sometimes just going after the urgent and not necessarily prioritizing the most important. So how are you able to make sure that you are most productive? And are there any hacks that you have to make sure that you don't get distracted?
A productivity hack I like to use is I try to touch things once, so I don't have to circle back around to it. I have a to-do list that I write out my weekly goals, and it gives me great satisfaction to be able to check them off at the end of the week or day. And that's how I remain. That's how I prioritize, and that's also how I remain on task.
Mm-hmm. So knowing what you know now from over these years of experience building multiple companies, what advice would you give your younger self?
Sam, I'm very appreciative of my journey, and I believe God's timing is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to choose one thing I would change, I would place a higher priority or an emphasis on networking,
mm-hmm.
and when I was younger and meeting new people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I valued that as much as I should have at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those connections are sometimes predestined. That one connection leads you to something that you've never expected, right? And I've seen that happen multiple times in my life as well. So it's a great wisdom there. Any parting wisdom for our audience?
My parting advice for any aspiring entrepreneur or leader is to follow your dreams. And if your dreams don't scare you, then you're not dreaming big enough.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. Well, Cory, I certainly appreciate you spending this time with me. I appreciate all the advice and wisdom that you have, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Hey, I appreciate it, Sam. And you guys have been great, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Most certainly.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.